So today we begin in the book of Ruth, and I am super, super excited. The setting is way back when, in the time of the judges, and it is in Bethlehem, in Judah. Our characters are Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Kilian and Mahlon. And you got to remember, during this time of Judges, it was a constant cycle. But kind of think of it as a constant cycle going down. So Israel would be really, really good for a while, and everything would be honky-dory. But then they would start turning to other gods and doing all sorts of things. And then God's judgment would come upon them. And then they would cry out, Lord, Lord. And then he would raise a judge to save them. In fact, in Judges 17:6, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And so there was this famine in the land, most likely because, okay, that's the map there of the land. And so there was this famine in the land. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, doesn't that kind of sound like this country right now? That we have gone so far away from God. Everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. There is no absolute truth. And this is kind of like gone into government as well. I know the term Christian nationalism is very controversial. So all I'm suggesting is that we need to pay attention to godly men and women that are entering politics. We need to be informed, and we need to put God back into this country. So back to our story. So they moved to Moab, a very, very pagan country. And you got to remember, Moab had like many, many, many gods. We have the god of Molech or Chemosh, and also we had a fertility god. Did you know that with the god of Molech or Chemosh, that they would practice child sacrifice? They would heat up this big statue. I'm thinking like this big, huge statue. They'd heat there's like a little platform, they heat it up really, really hot. And people would sacrifice their children to this god Molech, and then there was like this slanty thing, and the babies would just slide on down. And then they also had a fertility god, where there was a temple prostitute, and all sorts of nasty and bad things went on there as well. So you have Naomi, Elimelech, Mahlon, and Kilian living in this land. And we got to remember, Exodus 34:14 says that God is a jealous God, a very jealous God. And so they're living in this land. And often, when people moved in ancient times, they would take on the gods or goddesses of that land, as well as their own. They figured, hey, the more the merrier, right? Not so. Like I said, God is a very jealous God. So what would be the modern day equivalent to child sacrifice? I'm going to say abortion. Did you know that in 1973, when Roe versus Wade came into play, my numbers might be off, but it's over 53 million babies have been aborted. And the overturn of Roe versus Wade on a national level was huge. But now you must remember, each and every state decides. So we still need to get godly men and women into our state level government as well to challenge things like this. Back to our story. So there was a tragedy in the land. Elimelech dies. But don't despair. We still have Mahlon and Chilion are left. And they actually married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. But now you got to remember something. The Israelites were not supposed to intermarry. I mean, King Solomon later, he did it. In 1 Kings 11, it says his wives turned his heart away from God. Now, when I was in search of the future Mrs. Peterson, I had a few requirements. Number one, she had to love the Lord her God with all her heart, soul, and mind. Number two, she had to have kept herself pure for marriage, because I did as well. And number three, she needed to be blonde. As you can see, her hair is not blonde, but I'm okay with that. It's actually getting a little gray, but they said that gray in the Bible means wisdom, a head of splendor. So I see a few wise people out there. So, I'm thinking, a lot of times in life, Christian people, they fall in love with somebody, and there's hearts circling their head, and then they think to them, then they find out that person doesn't want nothing to do with God. Nothing at all. What should we do? I know if I marry them, they're going to come to know the Lord and go to church with me and everything. That does happen, but 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? So for those of you that are young and not married, I really urge you, find a Christian spouse. Find somebody who loves the Lord. Don't be unequally yoked. But if you come to me and your partner is not a Christian, I will counsel you. I will share Jesus with both of you, but I can't marry an unequally yoked couple. And I hope that in the future, if that does happen, that you do understand. So back to our story. More tragedy. Mahlon and Chilion are dead. After 10 years, after Elimelech has died, they die as well. You know, tragedy does not let us know what's going to happen. Tragedy strikes just like that. In this case, it struck 3 times for Naomi. 3 times. When tragedy strikes in our lives, there's really nothing we can say to the person to make it better. As a pastor, I can be with you. As a pastor's wife, my wife can hug you. She loves hugs. And if you know the Lord, healing will happen faster. But time heals. And like I said, when tragedy strikes, we just need to be with them. So eventually, over time, it doesn't really tell us how long, Naomi pulled herself together, and she heard good things about Judah. She heard there was food in Judah, that the Lord had come back to Judah, to Bethlehem. She's going to go back to Bethlehem. And her 2 daughter-in-laws are going to come with her because they're just that loyal. But you got to remember, it's a very mountainous trek. It was like going over the Red Sea, around and over. And I went on the internet. If we were to do that trek today, it would be like 7 to 10 days. So you're thinking, piece of cake, right? I would like to say that too. I said piece of cake when I was in Arizona, hiking with my daughter Ashley, who's now back in Minnesota. But anyway, we were going up this, I guess you call them mountains, but it's not like the Rocky Mountains, but it's really high. And I had on my blue Crocs. I had no tennis shoes. So I'm like walking up very carefully, and my daughter says, don't drink all your water right away. I drank all my water right away. I was 3/4 of the way up, and I thought, how am I getting down? Very carefully. I didn't want to be airlifted off the mountain in Phoenix. That's not how I wanted to leave Phoenix. I made it safely, but then I realized, thinking about that, this trek was not going to be easy. And so, they're all going about their business. Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. Yes, Orpah. It's really hard to say that name. Orpah. And anyway, Ruth is like, stop! You guys don't have to come with me. You really, really don't. I mean, may the Lord bless you. May you have husbands back in Moab. May you have a good life. And they all cry because that's what women do, right? I mean, they'll hug and cry, and don't take offense. It's perfectly okay. My wife cries over everything. When she's happy, when she's sad, when she's mad. She'll probably cry before the end of the sermon. But they're all like, no, we're going with you. And then she's like, has another plea. Okay, so now, if Naomi says, if I were to get pregnant, okay, and I had 2 sons for you to marry, then you have to wait like forever too. But think about it. When my wife and I started having kids, I wanted a boy so bad. It was girl, and girl. I mean, I thought, what's with 3 girls? God must want me to have patience. But then we were totally flooded with happiness when our 4th was born, a boy. Since we were so flooded with happiness, we named him Noah. But seriously, I mean, to try to have 2 boys, I mean, come on. The odds were against her. But then she's like, okay, so the odds all work in our favor, and I got 2 boys. You got to wait a long time before you can marry them. I mean, people can barely wait in line at a convenience store. People can barely wait on the train tracks in Chadwick at 5 o'clock. That train does not move. You need to know another way out of town. People cannot wait. So this time, Orpah says, fine, I'll go back to my land. And Naomi's like, okay, your sister-in-law is going back. All right, why don't you go back? Come on. And Ruth, she puts her foot down and she says, no, I am going with you. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. And I declare as an oath to the Lord that I will even be buried with you. Oh my goodness. Did you notice something? Ruth did not say, your gods will be my gods. She said, your God will be my God. I believe something happened to Ruth in her association with her husband and with her mother-in-law Naomi. Something happened to her in the land of Moab. She came to know the one true God while living in one of the most pagan nations around, in Moab even. And did you know, when she declares an oath, people have different names for God. A lot of times the Israelites would use the word Elohim. And that was kind of a loose binding oath. But when you use the word Yahweh, you're getting out the big guns. It is an incredible oath. This Ruth, she knew the one true God. And I believe she was more loyal to God than many of the Israelites. So never underestimate where you are and the influence that you can have on others. Whether you're in high school, you can have a godly influence on your classmates. When you're playing sports, you can have a godly influence on your teammates and opponents. If you're in a nursing home, you can have a godly influence. You're thinking to yourself, I'm 80 years old. How can I have a godly influence on anybody anymore? I don't have a job. You can still have a godly influence on somebody in Walmart when they bump your cart. You can have a godly influence at the food pantry when somebody is being rude. Anywhere. As a farmer, you can have a godly influence as you're taking your grain to town. So never underestimate the godly influence that you can have. So Ruth and Naomi, they are headed back to the promised land, to Bethlehem, to Judah. And I'm thinking to myself, the Israelites were supposed to be set apart for God. But Ruth was totally sold out for God as she was going back. I'm reminded in 1 Peter 1:16, it says, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. We as Christians should not sit on the fence. We need to be totally for God. I think I need to go right. We need to be totally for God, not left. Anyway, I'm also reminded of our old saying, garbage in, garbage out. It really is true. I was reading in Matthew the other day, and Jesus was saying, with your eyes, what you take in, it's a window to your soul. And in Luke 11:33-36, he says something amazing. No one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light. But when it is bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore, be careful, lest the light in your darkness. If your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light. It's like that little old song. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I didn't sing, right? But that song is so cool. So they are back in town. They are back in Bethlehem. The whole town is buzzing. Here's Naomi. I can't believe Naomi's back. So cool. But where is Elimelech? Where is Mahlon? Where's Killian? And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for that means bitter. For the Lord has hit me with a huge blow. My whole family is gone, but I am here with my daughter-in-law, Ruth, who is a Moabite. That's crazy. So we ask ourselves so many questions in life when something bad has happened. And I told you I'm going to probably make my wife cry. So last week we learned a little story about our dating life. But we were like, I don't even think we were like totally an item yet. But I was looking for her one morning at college, and she was gone. The student life people came up to me and said, well, she left in the middle of the night because her mom is back home dying in the hospital. Her mom had ovarian cancer. And I headed back to Wilmer from Bemidji. I drove the speed limit too. And I got to the hospital. I knew I just had to be with them. Just be with them. I don't know what I can say. It was kind of cool though. At the same time that her mom was dying, some baby was born, and everybody was crying for both. Never again would her mom be able to see her grandkids. Never would she be able to see her daughters walk up and down the aisle, or her son. Never again, never would she be able to see her granddogs. I mean, Coco and Jason, I think she would have loved them. But I do believe she's up in there with heaven, with God. And you know what she said as she was dying? She was saying, just one life has changed for Jesus. If just one, it will be worth it. She totally accepted it. And I think everybody else did. It's hard. It's hard when somebody dies that we really, really love. And we have to remember Isaiah 55, 8 through 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Sometimes we're not going to know why. Sometimes we might, as we look back on our life, we might know why a person has passed. And sometimes we're never going to know. Back to our story, they arrive at the perfect time. I mean, it's so cool that we're doing the book of Ruth now, and it's harvest season. I see some people have even started, I want to say mowing their crops, but I know that's going to be really harvesting their crops. Okay. But it was perfect timing. And this was probably in March during the start of the barley harvest. God is always on time. God is never late, and he's never early. He's always on time. If you knew a year prior to June of this past year, our journey really started. Things started happening. Some things were kind of negative, as my wife was basically told to leave our church for reasons that it would just blow your mind. And so we went to a different church, and we loved it. And then, around December, she got a perfectly good review, but for some reason she was not offered a contract at Crown again. And it was like brutal. But then came Christmas time, and God revealed something to us that was just amazing. And over the course of time, of course, it's hard. But when we came to visit this church in May, we fell in love with the area, fell in love with the church. It would have been heartbreaking if you said no. So when David called and said the vote was yes, I was very calm on the phone. And when I hung up the phone, the cell phone that is, I was like, yes. So anyway, so God's timing is always perfect in your life. When you're praying and you're really seeking his will, his timing is always perfect. As we're going to see next week how the timing is so perfect, they're here during the barley harvest. And I believe that this timing here, Chadwick Evangelical Free Church, I really believe God is going to do something amazing in this community. I really, really do. And we always need in our life to practice reflection, to look back, reflect on our life, reflect on the day. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with somebody. They said, you know what? I'm going to sin, but when I go to bed at night, I reflect on that. I repent. I ask for forgiveness. And that is very important. So my challenge is for each one of us to look back on our life and to reflect and see what God is doing and be amazed and expecting him to do great things. And finally, I'm going to close out the message with James 4:8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Let us